Andrew. Andrew and your family. Can you tell me before I get into more how your dad and uncle and how your family is? How are you?
Yeah, so my uncle Jerry retired. He retired in the 80s. He lived a nice life. He just passed away about 2 years ago. So overall, health-wise, he lived a very long life. And I always say, if you do 20 years, if you work for the city, if you work for any big agency, if you at least do your 20, you better get your 20 after. You know what I mean? Ideally, of
Yeah.
course, it's always
Yeah.
nice. And much more. If you could live 30, 40 after, that's what we want to be hearing. We want to be hearing
Yeah.
you collecting that pension and doing your thing, traveling. So Uncle Jerry, he did that. He retired to Florida and he was working as a security guard. And then he got older. He got sick. He had diabetes. He got real sick, but he had a very
Yeah.
good life. Kids, grandkids, all that stuff.
Wow.
And then my
Yeah.
dad retired too. My dad did 27 years. And after my dad retired, he went down to Florida. Same thing. He's down in Florida. He is healthy. Overall, thank God, once
Yay.
again, day at a time, God willing, right now, he is okay. However, we're at that point where a lot of the guys that he was in the trade center with that lived, those guys now are getting all these illnesses, or some guys recently retired. Some guys I know did 40 years on the 40 in the fire department. Some guys retired and passed away within a year from 9/11 cancer or illness. It's like a mystery. So I know I said my dad and my uncle. On the other side of the family, though, we have a ton of military, Navy. My uncle John was a captain in the Navy, retired 22 years working on submarines. He lived a nice long life after, had a pension, worked for Lockheed. He passed
Yeah.
away a few years ago, though. And then my uncle Mike was a Marine. My uncle Pete was in the Navy and the NYPD. My uncle Pete was down at Ground Zero, retired. Unfortunately, Uncle Pete passed young. He was only, in his late 40s. He got some weird mystery illness. They don't have a name for it, but it was definitely acquired, they think, down at Ground Zero. This is really interesting. Uncle Pete was in the NYPD and he was in the Navy, and he traveled all over the world with the Navy. He also played soccer.
Wow.
And
Oh.
Uncle Pete got this illness. Okay, they don't know exactly what it is, but a whole Italian soccer team and a lot of athletes also got this same thing. It basically mimics ALS. It's very
Mm.
similar, but it's not exactly that. Okay, but it basically, Uncle Pete's arm started to get affected. It didn't work as well, and then it just deteriorated and spread throughout his body. But they didn't have an actual name. No one could pinpoint and say, "Oh, it's definitely this. It's definitely that." But the common thing is that they were all down at Ground Zero, and then years later, these weird things come up. So if you're listening out there, whether you're active duty, retired, you just did a few years, make sure every year you're going to get your health checks, your medical
Yeah.
exams. Okay, you got to do that stuff. Stay on top of it, because I know guys that had 20, 25 years healthy, 9/11, whatever, and then now all of a sudden they go from one year to the next and something comes out of nowhere. So whatever these things are, these illnesses down there, they can be very mysterious and they can creep up on you.
You just mentioned something, so I am giving your family thank you for serving and those that have served quite an extensive history there. That's just beautiful to have people like that do this. I mean, each year, each generation, you yourself, you're a veteran, um, fire department. And then again, as I refer to you, the psychic firefighter, um, you know, and eventually, we won't give a lot of back channel stuff, but eventually when you're in my neck of the woods, as we have said a long time ago, we plan to meet up. Um, Getting you on here, a couple of things, but you just mentioned something to me and I I'm usually not speechless. Um, you said so. ALS is not genetic. Number one. Number two, there are people in my family right now, not directly next to me, but connected, and two, a brother and a sister, just out of the blue. And they're like, "Well, it's ALS." Well, no, it's not mimicking that. It's not. Doesn't seem like that. The only thing they have in common is they both live in New York. So That's the only thing in common right there is this brother and sister. So shout out to them too. They're dealing with a lot right now. Dennis has passed, but now his sister. They're like ALS. I'm like, that's not genetic. Like how and at that age. So we'll talk more about that subject maybe later on. That's
Mhm.
very, very interesting. I 100% believe and know, just like at your fire pits, right? When you're deployed. When you're deployed and you're doing certain things, you're around these fire pits, your lungs, there's all kinds of things that, we as there are civilians, there are people that just aren't used to that environment. And, we try to educate and, they're not supposed to know. So then it's like, okay, let's step up. That's the area I'm in. When someone says, what do you mean gold star mom? Did you get like a gold sticker? And I'm like, this is not a joke. Listen. And I don't get mad. I just turn around and I go, I just like to let you know something because, maybe for the next person, you didn't offend me, but I bet you didn't even know. And so I just want to educate. So in order to do that, I have to talk and bring in other people. SWAT down here is very familiar with this subject happening quite a bit. As he served 2 tours as well in Iraq. And so the fire department, and then you led a different journey. You were at ground zero. Can you just do a brief synopsis somehow of the feeling that I have talked to you that when you figured out this was going on, you knew it was your dad, correct? You knew they were
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
Right.
So when this happened at the time, 9/11, when that actually in that moment happened, just so people are listening, I was living way out east in an area
Yeah.
called the Hamptons. I'm sure people have heard of the Hamptons at some point. And I was working. I had just finished my active duty in the U.S. Coast Guard, and now I was I was living out in the Hamptons, and I was working as an electrician for a Coast Guard veteran. So did the Coast Guard, and then after worked for a guy. Same thing. We just find each other. We stick with each other. You know how this stuff goes. So working
Yeah.
with a guy out there, and I go to get breakfast, and I hear on the radio what's going on at Ground Zero. I'm listening to Howard Stern, and I hear a building hit the World Trade Center, and I thought, this is a joke. He must be pulling a stunt because no way. This is impossible, right? Like, come on. And then I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, this is serious. So I'm like, I need to call my dad. And I just had this gut feeling. I didn't even know if he was working. I had no clue. I just had this feeling. I said, he's there. I just had this feeling he's there right now. I don't know. I didn't know he was even working that moment. I go, but I know he's there. I just knew it. I had like a feeling, a vision, a quick flash. And of course you want to believe he's okay. You don't know for sure until you make that call. And making that call, if you're listening out there and you have a loved one that's away, or they're active duty, or they're in a firehouse, or they're in a police station, you turn on the TV, you see some horrible incident in their response area, and you're like, you cringe. Oh my God, let me make sure they're okay. I'm sure they are, but I don't know. That's what I was feeling now for the first time in my life, like that. And I remember calling the firehouse, and a guy answered. And he's like, whatever firefighter, I didn't know who he was. And I said, oh, is my dad there, Richie? And he's like, no, they've been relocated to Manhattan. My dad worked in Brooklyn. So when I heard that, I go, they're there now. And then in this meantime, I'm like, oh my God. So I go back to my house and I'm watching the TV, this giant flat screen TV with all my roommates. It was the old TVs that were gigantic, right? It
Yeah.
almost looked like a projector. Remember that old school TV
Yeah.
before they were on the wall? We're all watching this. And we're like, it's almost like a movie. Like, we can't believe it. One of my roommates, I lived in this big house in the Hamptons. One of my roommates, her husband at the time was an FBI agent. And before the building fell, this lady said to me, she goes, I just talked to my husband. And she said, he just got a report that there were guys. This is what I heard from this lady. She said, my husband got a report from the FBI or people he worked with that there were guys on these planes in New York, and they supposedly had these red bands around their heads, and they had machetes, and they were decapitating people. This is what I heard right away. And I'm like, we didn't know anything yet. And I'm like, what? Like, how did they get a knife on the plane? Wait, oh my God. So we're talking about all this. And as we're hearing this, boom, the building falls. So I'm like, oh my God. Oh my God. And I just kept telling myself, he's okay, he's okay, he's okay. I call my mom, call my brother. So from the time the building fell around 9 o'clock, we didn't hear from my dad until about 5 hours later. So for 5 hours, we were like, pacing. Oh my God, the fire commissioner goes on TV or someone, a spokesperson saying, I just lost at least 300 people. And I'm like, oh my God. Now there's no cell phones. There's no radios, nothing. I'm walking around, but something in me was like, he's okay. He's okay. Maybe I just wanted to tell myself that. I don't know. I just know at that moment I couldn't, right? I didn't go to that place of, oh my God, it's over. Something in me though changed. So at that point in my life, I was not doing psychic work. I was not into any of this, but a shift or something in me started to occur. Okay. I could feel it. Something was going on. I couldn't explain. I couldn't put into words. And then bang, around 2:00, my mom called me and said, I just heard from your dad. He got someone's phone. He's okay. And I'm like, boom, the weight of the world just dropped. You know what I mean? However, I know that there's guys in there that I grew up with, okay, literally, that I talked about as being an uncle or a friend or people's, other kids that their dad that I know were in there who are not coming home. A best friend of ours, my brother's best friend, was an EMT, Keith Fairban, and he was working that day and his parents called him on the phone and he answered. He said, Mom and Dad, I'm here. I'm at the Trade Center. I'll call you back. And he never called him back. He went back into the building. Boom, it collapsed. Now, when I talked to my dad eventually and said, hey, what happened? He said, we got a good call. We go to the roof of the firehouse. We heard, a plane hit the Trade Center. He goes, we go to the roof of the firehouse. We're looking, and we saw the second plane go in. Now, whatever it was, people say it's whatever. He saw something go in and explode. Now, there were guys also we know that were actually there that saw the plane go into, that were actually at the site. So when that happens, my dad's team runs downstairs. My dad was the chauffeur the night before. So the call came in at 10-9. And my dad usually would work till 9 on the dot. For some reason that morning, a guy came in and goes, hey, I'm going to drive, just, take a shower, go home, Richie. He's like, all right, whatever. But he said, I just hung out. I'm hanging out. We're having breakfast. And so a different driver was working. But my dad was still there. They see the plane hit. They go downstairs. They jump on the truck. Boom. They're driving there. The engine in my dad's house, there was a ladder. My dad works in ladder 102. Engine 209 was there. They got dispatched earlier. So engine 209's there. Engine 209 goes through the tunnel. They get off. They're walking down the block to the Trade Center, okay? And someone jumped out of one of the buildings and hit another firefighter named Danny Sir from engine 216. They start working on him, right? They're trying to resuscitate him. As they're doing that, the building falls. So if that didn't happen, my dad's whole company, the engine in there, they all would have been killed, all of them. But that one guy saved all their lives. That's a miracle. My dad's company, the ladder, they're en route. They get to the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel, and the police department goes, no one can go through. There's a bomb threat. And my dad said all the guys in the back are screaming at the chauffeur, drive through, go through the barricade, screw that, go, go, go. And he goes, I can't. It says on the computer to stay here. If I disobey the order, you can get fired. It's a real dangerous thing to disobey a direct order. And the police are there saying no one can go through. There's bomb threats in there. So the guy waited. And my dad said, he goes, if I was still driving that day, I would have went through the barricade. It would have went right through, of course. But they waited. And as they're waiting, the first building falls. And then the police go, okay, you can walk through. So they grab their gear. They're walking through. They walk 2 miles with all their stuff. They walk through, and he said it was like a world war going on. They didn't know what was going on, okay? And no communication, nothing going on there. All this madness happening. So my dad's company in the area he worked in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn, people can look this up. Every single house in that area that day, every single house in that area, every guy working died that day, except my dad's firehouse. For some reason, I don't know why. Was it an act of God? Was it an angelic thing? I have no idea. All I know is for some reason, they were all alive, and everyone, literally. So the survivor's guilt and all of that stuff never goes away. Never. I have endless stories I could tell you about guys I know, and oh my God, things they experienced and went through. It's unreal when you go through that kind of thing. So it was a miracle for them to get out of it. And for a couple of years, my life was just not the same. The grief and all that stuff and the PTSD, I can't even describe it. People wouldn't even understand. It doesn't make sense unless you go through it. Okay, you go through you guys know what I'm talking about. People listening that just, they move on with their lives, eventually they go on. But every year still, when that year comes up, when that time of year comes up, it's the weirdest feeling. You don't want to have a good face on. You don't want to be happy for anything. Doesn't matter if a birthday comes up. You just have a weird feeling in you. I can't describe it, but it was also a big driving factor for me. When I saw the planes hit, when I was watching on TV, the first thought that came to me was, oh my God, I wish I was in there. And people are like, that's crazy. I know guys that were like, I don't want anything to do with that after seeing that. And I go, I wish I was in there. I don't care what happens after. It is what it is. If I go, I go. If I stay, I stay. But I wish I was in there to help. You know what I mean? And I just was really driven at that point. And I took the fire department test right after, got 100 and 100, waited 5 years anyway, because everyone's got to wait. With 100 and 100, I waited 5 years, training and everything, waiting, counting my blessings. And then in 2006, I got on. The dream came true. And then that's when my journey started with this.
Wow. That is a very, very, very personal, as one individual has mentioned here. Hello, Brent. We see you with us. Eye-opening story. Definitely. When you hear the human heartbeat of a story that was on a TV or is something you know parts of, to hear the actual people that talk, it's definitely eye opening and it definitely goes to the heart. I agree. Thank you for that, Brent, and thank you for sharing too there, Andrew. Um, you made it, you did this, and generations were, you know, the New York Fire Department. I mean, that in itself, like, look, listen to his voice, everybody. You can tell immediately, like, where he's from. Number one, so I knew immediately. I was like, oh yeah, you're from. I know exactly where you're from, and this is no one's gonna have that same story ever, literally. This is something that it is very true in the beginning too, is that there are still things happening because they were there, because of what was, let's just say, of what was happening. We don't have to get into who believes what and who doesn't unless you want to. But I say, listen, you can't be in something like that and have no your energy, whether it's mental, physical, emotional, the toll that it takes, and your health, on top of why your health is the way that it is. Um, so Andrew, as far as like, they moving on, I personally believe, and I'll just give my own personal, being around all of that and what was going on and breathing that in, like, had an effect majorly, especially on those rushing in. And I personally believe your story with your family members, that is what uh, contributed to to their lives, right? Like, you know,
Yeah.
that's what I believe. No one has to believe what I believe, but I can tell you, I listen up there, and then I have my own in here, and you know what? And then I say, well, look, and if you don't believe me out there, that's fine. But when someone is served, they serve for your freedom of speech. They serve for your freedom, your rights, you name it. So yes, if you don't agree, that's fine, because that's why people serve. So I don't want us to all be robots, right? Like, I want there to be different people, but I do believe in do no harm. I do believe in kindness, and I do believe in treating people with that respect that you want back. So, and then getting to the what I call the heartstrings. That's a song, by the way, that I'm going to be working on with SWAT down there. So, my heart is out there for you, your family. What about your mom? So immediately my heart's going, your mom, I'd be freaking out, right? I mean,
Yeah.
was she
You know,
okay?
yeah. So, it's all around. Like I said, it's a family. It's the other side of the family. It's everyone doing this. Everyone serving. Everyone, risking every day going to work. My mom's she's alive. She's healthy. And she says to me, she goes, I don't sleep right. I just can't.
Ah,
ingrained, like, I know you're okay, you know what I mean? But like
Yeah.
still you forget and like you dream. And then, like I said, you have this constant reminder. My mom stayed in the town I grew up in, Flower Park, New York, Long Island. My mom still lives there. She's still doing it. You know what I mean? She's still, both my parents are happily remarried and everything, and it's all good. And, she's still doing her thing. And she's still, like I said, will not sleep right at times. She'll have weird dreams. And a lot of the guys that we serve with, the ones that did make it out, now it's interesting. I've met so many guys that work 30 years, that do their thing. And then within the first year, a lot of them will get sick out of nowhere. It's wild. So I don't know what this stuff is. I know guys that have been clean as a whistle, retired, and then within a year they'll have diabetes, cancer throughout their blood, leukemia, or they call it 9/11. They don't know what it is, this weird stuff, and then they're gone within a year. So there's a guy out there, people can look up, Steve Garrity, my first chief on the job. Steve Garrity worked with my dad. Ed Garrity was Steve's brother. He lost his life at the Trade Center. He was a battalion chief down there, right in Times Square, and I knew him too. And growing up as a kid, I knew all those guys growing up around them. And Ed died at the Trade Center. Steve did 40 years in the job. He took it so seriously. Okay, this is all business. This guy, even if his brother died, it was all business, because it is very serious. When you're going to work, be a professional. When you're off work, listen, you can have a blast, do whatever you got to do. When you're at work, we're professionals. We do the job we got to do because people are depending on us. And doesn't matter what's going on or who's in the building. I never, once in my firefighting career, I never asked for someone's ID when I was helping them. Okay, I didn't care who or what. I would go in and help you. I don't care where you're from, what background, where you're born, what your political belief is. I don't care. I just ran in that building full of smoke, and I'm pulling you out. And if you don't like me, then that's too bad. I still would look out for you. I'd still risk my life for you. And the guys I work with, we all had that thing about us. So yeah, we can have our differences, but we go in and do our thing. Steve Garrity did 40 years, retired. He was sick, and he passed away within a year from 9/11 related illness. And man, like I talked about earlier, I want everyone to retire, to do their thing. You never know what's going to happen in life. So reflecting and looking back, also try to enjoy the journey. Yes, it's all business, it's all this, it's all that, but also you want to enjoy your life. Okay. We take things serious when they're serious, but when it's not serious, let loose, enjoy yourself, travel, go away, do the things you want to, because if you say, when I retire, I'm going here and I'm going to do this for 20 years, you have no idea what life's going to bring. So enjoy the ride along the way. They have that expression, smell the roses. That's one thing I learned in therapy over the years. Okay. Because I also, right after I got on the fire department, I graduated Pro-B school. 2 months out of Pro-B school, I was a squad leader. So all the military guys, we were all in charge of a group of like 20 guys. So I was squad leaders with guys, and you form a bond with the squad leaders because we're all ex-military. We know things a little differently. We graduate Pro-B school. Literally 2 months after Pro-B school, the guy that stood in front of me at Pro-B school, who was a Marine, he goes to his first fire and dies. And it wasn't his fault. There was a store fire. They extinguished it. It's out. They're just sitting there. And there was a air conditioning unit on the roof, and the roof was unstable. The AC unit falls through. His name is Michael Riley, and his lieutenant was literally with him. They got sent into the basement by this AC unit. They were literally together. They were crushed together. They had crush syndrome. So as soon as they would let go and decompress them, we knew they were going to bleed out. So the fire department came, and they sent a tube with a microphone down. They called his wife on the phone, and they had him talking on the phone to his wife while he was crushed, knowing that when the crushing was out, he was going to lose his life. And the first thing he said to his wife on the phone is, "How's the Pro-B? How's Mike? Where is he?" He didn't know what was going on, that he was crushed with him. Okay. And he was on the phone with his wife for a few hours, and finally they brought the microphone back up, released, and him and Lieutenant Howie Carpluck lost their life. I had 2 months on the job. So I got an introduction to what the FDNY is all about. 98% of the job is amazing. Everything's, oh my God, it's the best thing ever. It's just that little percentage of when things don't go the way you want to, and then you got to deal with that side of it. And it does happen. It's usually all good. Usually everything's great and amazing, but every once in a while, something messed up happened to someone you love, someone you know, someone you went to Pro-B school with. And then a couple of years later in my career, about 10 years into it, I unfortunately lost one of my lieutenants, which this is how this gets into all the psychic stuff. So if you want me to share all about that, how this really exploded.
Of course,
Absolutely.
most
Okay,
definitely.
so people are
We
wondering
have
what the,
we've got several veterans, Gold Star families. We've got
yeah.
civilians. Um, yes, they definitely want you to. That's for sure. So, but
Yeah,
I
so this
always
is the
say,
goods.
what you want. Like, share what you want. I am not censored.
Yeah, yeah.
We can do what we want on here. Well, you know what I mean.
Yeah.
We're all free.
So I have a lieutenant lose his life. Horrendous. Once again, now I'm dealing with it at work. You know what I mean? Like I'm like, oh my God, like this is great. You know, the PTSD, the guys, everything was great. Everyone was there for each other, but all that stuff after the anniversaries, all that weird stuff. Now, in the meantime, me and my grandmother were rock solid, very tight as a kid growing up. My best friend. We used to sit and watch that show on TV, Unsolved Mysteries. And in like 1993, I'm with my grandmother on the couch in Floral Park, Long Island, and I look at her watching Unsolved Mysteries. I go, Gram, when you go to heaven one day, can you come back like that? You know, like they do on TV, and give me a sign so I know that you're okay and you're with Grandpa. And she looked at me and she goes, yeah, I will. Now, I don't know why I said it. We didn't have those kinds of conversations. We weren't real religious or anything. We didn't talk about that stuff. And honestly, after 1993, I never brought it up again. Well, fast forwarding, around 2010, Graham gets sick. She passes. And I took care of her at the end of her life. I saw her every day. I'd go to the firehouse. My days off, I went and took care of her. I drove her to the doctor. I went through all of that with her. Okay. And I don't regret any of it. I had to go. I had to do it for whatever reason. She had to be there and experience that. When she transitioned, though, I go, I need to know she's okay. I'm not thinking about the psychic thing, though. I'm not at all. So I went to a doctor. I went to a therapist. I went to counseling. I went to friends, family, a priest, everyone. And the priest said to me, I said, Father, where's Graham? How do I know she's okay? He goes, well, she's okay. I said, how do we know? He goes, in the Bible, it says blah, 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 blah. I go, no, I get that. I go, but how do we really know? Like, how do we know for sure? He goes, we just have to have faith. I go, no offense, Father. I go, that's not enough. I go, this is my grandmother. I have to know. Well, right after that, I go, it's a couple weeks after Graham passes, I go out to a restaurant in town called Jameson's in Floral Park, New York with my mom. We're both grieving, both going through all this crap. We're sitting at a restaurant eating dinner. This guy comes in with long hair, earrings, and a leather jacket, comes up to me and my mom and says, did someone in your family just die? They had cancer right here on their face. I go, yeah. And he goes, you or your mom, who was born on Easter Sunday? My mom was born on Easter Sunday in 1956. I go, her. And I'm like, what, you know, who is this? He goes, oh, I'm a psychic medium. I'm doing a reading of the restaurant. I'm like, yeah, all good. You know, keep going, whatever. And he does his reading. I'm still skeptical though at the time, right? I'm just like, whatever. I wait a year. I'm not on social media, nothing, no Facebook. I'm not putting it all together yet. I tracked the guy down because I was going through an awful time in life. My house was underwater from Hurricane Sandy in Long Island. I lost everything. My house, my wife, everything, man, gone, literally. Not from death. Okay, we just got separated. It's all good, though. But anyway, at the time, I was going through a ton. I tracked this guy down. I get a reading, and at the end of the reading, he brought up all different things from the first time I saw him. At the end of the reading, he looks at me. He goes, you know you have the gift. I said, what are you talking about? He goes, you have the gift of being a medium. I go, all right, well, what do I do? You know, and I was open to this guy because he came from a family of police. Okay, his dad was a retired detective, big time. And I go, all right, well, let me check this out. Show me. So I go back the next week. And I found out later, basically one of my grandmothers, I would consider her, she worked with his mother. It turned out to be. So it was like a lot of connections, you know? So I go back a week later, I sit down with this guy in his studio with about 20 people I didn't know. I'd never seen anyone before. We meditate for 5 minutes. He pairs me up with a young lady I never met before. He goes, okay, just tell her what you're seeing. And all of a sudden, I'm looking at her and I get a tingle in my spine. I look at her and I start to see these black and white images really fast rolling out one after another. And I go, I see a car going down the block in reverse. It hits a tree. Someone's left leg, the left leg in particular, is cut off. And then there's a V above them. I said, is their name Vinny or Vince or something with a V? Is that what that means? She looks at me. She goes, that's my Uncle Vinny. I go, okay, like this is the first time this happened. Like, all right, is this real? Is she making this up? Well, every week this happened, every week. So I'm still in the firehouse doing this on the side. I don't want anyone to know, right? I don't want anyone to know anything about this. Eventually, like anything, guys find out, because I go to a live reading one night where this guy was doing a live reading of the big room, and I see guys from the firehouse, and they're like, "Hey, bro," and I'm like, "Oh, I know him," with friends, and he's like, "Oh, yeah, you're into that," and I'm like, "Yeah." I still didn't want anyone to know, but life sometimes has plans of its own. Well, the New York Post finds out, okay, that I'm into this stuff. I'm into being a medium because I started talking about it on social media, and the New York Post ends up writing an article about me. So it is what it is. Everything in there is true. I don't deny any of it. And it's in there. And then that was it. The cat was out of the bag. Everyone knows. So I'm going to the firehouse. Then my days off, I'm having big, rough, tough guys, veterans, Iraq combat veterans, Middle East, Vietnam vets, anyone and everyone, guys all over the job contacting me privately. "Hey, bro, can you help me? Can you read me? Can you my mom, can you talk to my wife? Can you talk to my cousin?" And I'm reading like distant relatives that I know nothing about as well. I don't like reading people I know just because they're like, "Oh, you kind of know me. So like, is it like pre-planned?" And I'm like, "Dude, I'm doing this for free, bro. Like, I'm a fireman and I'm working on the side. I'm not getting paid for this. Why would I be making this up? You know what I mean? For nothing. Duh, am I an idiot? No." So I was just doing it to help people heal.
Right.
Because when I got that reading that first time, I was healed from my grandmother's passing. Done. Because I knew, whoa, what that guy said to me, she's okay. She's in a good place because she was sick and suffering at her death. So wherever she is, the way she communicated things to me and brought up things from the past, and this guy doesn't know me, I know that she's okay. I don't care what anyone says. I know in my heart. And then when I knew I could do this, I go, if I can do this and help people, oh my God, I don't need to make a living out of it. I just want to help people. I was working in the firehouse, doing this part, just on the side. Eventually in life, though, right, as life happens and things go on, the current state we're in, living with COVID, I'll get into that. So I'm working in the firehouse. I'm reading guys. I'm helping people. I also, as well, people look me up, I've also had thousands of documented, film, documented, studied, analyzed UFO sightings. So that's just something I've seen too as well. That's very interesting, that I've had professionally analyzed. I've been studied by a doctor at Stanford University. There's a ton to this. People can look this up. There's a ton into this. But basically, there was a connection. There's a connection, I believe, with our loved ones when they transition, and these lights in the sky. Why? After my grandmother died, I went outside one night. I go, "Graham, if you're here, if you get to hear me, show me a sign. Give me something. I need to see something." And all of a sudden, bang, a ball of light appeared, and it was pink, and it glided across the sky.
Wow.
It glided across, and I go, "Oh my God, that is great. Like, what's pink? Nothing on a plane is pink." And I've seen this ball of light and filmed it and recorded it now, for, I don't know, over a decade, right? It's just wild, the things I've seen. And the people I've met along this journey have validated these things too, that there's some sort of connection. So the guys in the firehouse knows, everyone knows, the cat's out of the bag. People are like, "What do the guys think?" I'm like, they loved it. They used to strap like, alien dolls or like psychic things or UFOs to my locker. But that's the firehouse. When they love you, they break your chops. If they don't break your chops, there's something wrong. So they were just like, "That's you. That's Raz." My nickname is Raz because Andrew Razowitz. They were just like, "That's Raz. He's a freak. He's a weirdo." But all that matters, how are you at a fire? If you're good at a fire, you could be the biggest freak in the world. No one cares. The crazier and the wilder, actually, the usually better they are at a fire because you're more of a risk taker. But you learn as time goes on too. You assess risk versus reward and all that. That comes with time. But guys love that. They like someone that's really out there. So I just didn't hide it. I was like, whatever. Once they knew, it is what it is. And the FDNY themselves officially on record, when I knew that the New York Post was going to write an article about me, their writer contacted me and I said, "I don't want an article. Don't do this. I don't want any publicity. I don't know if you're going to write anything weird." I called the FDNY all the way to the press desk. The head of the press desk said to me, "We have no problem with what you're doing or you're saying. What you're doing is helping people. In fact, we need more guys like you to talk about good, positive, spiritual things. There's nothing mean or negative. You're helping guys heal and families on your day off for free. No one does nothing for free, man. That's very special." So I always say, no, man, the job was great. They supported me, man. It's just not enough people come forward and talk about this stuff that it's like so weird and taboo. And like now though, with this current space we're living in with social media, oh my God, this is the hot topic. Everyone wants to talk about this.
Well, so I have a question for you, Andrew. Just listen to your story.
Yep.
It's absolutely amazing. But just looking back, just kind of listen to everything. You said something earlier when 9/11 happened. You said you kind of had that internal feeling. You kind of knew automatically that even though, of course, that's one of the most traumatic, times of anybody's life, not just in New York, but of course around the world. But you kind of instinctively knew immediately that your father was okay. So that being said, do you think now looking back that was one of the moments when you did have the gift? You know what I'm saying? You see what I'm trying to get
Yeah.
at? Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. So I talk to guys after Ground Zero over the years, even still to this day, they'll call me. After that event happened, still, I've been in firehouses and seen this, and I talk to guys who are not into this that told me this. They said they literally saw the physical form and apparition of guys that died that day. Some guys would stay in the TV room. Sometimes their form would stay in a bunk room where the beds are. Sometimes they just run them to a locker room. Guys that have died at work or active duty, you will see at times, literally, I've heard this story now all over the world with social media, people have quoted it, but I'm saying I've literally seen it. So going back, I've heard stories about guys at fires. Wow, I saw a vision. I heard something. And then it happened to me as well. That happened when I was younger. Then when I was active duty, one time I got off the truck, I was going to a fire. This is December 26, 2015. I'll never forget it. Going to a fire, getting my stuff, gathering my gear, getting everything together, right? I get off the rig. I could see like a purplish mist come in. This only happened once. And I look at it, it's like time froze. It stopped. And I saw an outline of what looked like a body. And I heard my grandmother's voice, and she was passed away already. She goes, Andrew, don't go in there. And I looked at the apparition, the outline, and this is what made it really specific though. I smelt her 1980s Bill Blass vanilla scent perfume. And that's specific. That's like a real grandma smell. You know what I mean?
Right.
I go,
That's why I'm
and
smiling.
that's what she wore. I go, literally took an inhale, time froze, and then boom, we were back at it. I'm like, so I grab my stuff, go to the front of the building, and the chief comes over. He goes, 119, ladder 119, you're going in the top floor. And I look to the guy next to me who's a probie. He had the orange pumpkin patch on. I look at him and I go, hold on a second. The guys are with me. I go, hold on. They're like, what? And I'm like, you can't disobey a direct order. Once again, you can get fired for that, bro. That's a big deal. So I go, just wait. 30 to 40 seconds later, we're looking at the top floor. Fire blows out of every window.
Oh, wow.
We would have been killed instantly. So after the guys are like, how did you know that? Like, what was up? I didn't get into the whole Graham thing at that minute. I just go, if your soul ever talks to you, you have a gut feeling really strong, listen to it. Because if I didn't do that, I would have ran right in like I normally would have. But I had 10 years on the job. Times are different. And like I said, that never happened before. So now when I hear stories from guys of similar things in combat or working at a firehouse or police station, oh, yeah, it's real. You better believe it. There's some force, whether it's angels, family, something, aliens, I don't know, something out there that I feel kind of looks out for us, kind of guides us. And then if we have the eyes or ears to see this or pay attention, yes, you can see it. It's just the ego and all these things we deal with says, that's nonsense. That's bullshit, bro. Don't talk about that. You know what I mean? The guy thing. But oh, no. Guys have had this. Some of the biggest, roughest, toughest guys have come to me with similar things.
Wow. That's amazing.
It really is. We're